Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jed Lee. You are tuned in to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from Reedville, the loveliest neighborhood in all of Boston. Our mission is to help all families grow closer through reading, and we do that by introducing you to the coolest authors, the funniest tales, and a whole lot of reading inspiration for the whole family. We hope that you will help spread the word by telling all of your family and friends, your kids' teachers, librarians, principals, and random strangers you meet on the street, all about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Amazon Music, Podcast Addict, Audible, CastBox, Player FM, YouTube. Wherever you find your favorite shows, you can find Reading with Your Kids. We have a really fun look at some great graphic novels. First up, S.H. Cotugno is here to celebrate The Glass Scientist Volume 3. Later in the show, we'll take a listen back to a conversation we had with Jake Wheeler. Hey, my friends, you know one of my favorite parts of the day is story time. There's just something magical about snuggling up with your kids, opening a great book, and escaping into an adventure together. And let me tell you, that moment becomes even more magical when you're curled up in the softest, coziest bedding you've ever felt. That's why I'm so excited that CozyEarth.com is supporting Reading with Your Kids. Their bamboo sheets, comforters, and pajamas are unbelievably soft, naturally breathable, and temperature regulating, which means no more sweaty nights or chilly toes. Right now, Cozy Earth is offering Reading with Your Kids listeners an unbelievable and exclusive 41% off their entire site. That's right, you heard me right, 41% off. So go ahead, create your own cozy reading nook, wrap yourself and your kids up in something comfy, grab your favorite bedtime book, and turn story time into the best part of your day. Head on over to CozyEarth.com and use the promo code READ at checkout to save 41%. That's CozyEarth.com, promo code READ. Hey, this episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by AspireDrinks.com. Hey, I have a quick question for you. Have you ever wanted a little extra energy, but not the kind that makes your heart race or leaves you crashing an hour later? Well, that's exactly why I want to tell you about Aspire Drinks. You'll find them at AspireDrinks.com. Aspire calls itself a healthy energy drink, and honestly, that description really fits. Instead of loading you up with sugar or extreme caffeine, Aspire delivers a gentle, steady boost with 80 milligrams of natural caffeine from green tea and guarana. That's about half the caffeine of most energy drinks, enough to help you stay focused without the jitters or the crash. It's also zero sugar, 0 calories, and 0 artificial additives, which makes it a great choice for parents, teachers, and anyone trying to make healthier choices while still getting things done. And get this, it actually tastes great, light, crisp, and lightly sparkling, with flavors like sweet cherry, raspberry acai, mango lemonade. That's what I love. No heavy aftertaste and easy on the stomach. Aspire is packed with B and C vitamins, biotin, and ginger. And it's vegan, gluten-free, keto-friendly, really designed for real life. And just for Reading with Your Kids listeners, you can get an exclusive discount of 20% off. That's the highest discount available when you shop at AspireDrinks.com and use our promo code READ. That's READ at AspireDrinks.com. Healthy energy done right. Join us right now from Los Angeles in California. Our guest is here today to celebrate Volume 3 of The Glass Scientist. Please welcome to the show, S.H. Cotugno. Hey, Sage, how are you?
I'm good, Jed. How are you?
Wonderful. I'm really looking forward to learning about The Glass Scientist. I always mention this because I don't want parents to make the same mistake that I made. My son is very happy. We're very close. He's an adult having a great career. He devoured graphic novels, anime, all that stuff. He loved it. I supported it, but I didn't realize at the time that he was reading. You know, I would every once in a while I'd go into his room and go, dude, could you please, you're in high school, you're in college, can you please read a book that doesn't have a picture in it? What do you think, dude? And so I didn't give him the credit that he was actually reading literature, like good literature. And so parents, if your kids are into graphic novels, they're reading, and that should be celebrated.
Hell yeah.
So tell us about The Glass Scientist.
So The Glass Scientist is my graphic novel series. It is about the life and times of a ragtag group of mad scientists who are trying to survive in a treacherous alternate Victorian London under the questionable guidance of their enigmatic leader, Dr. Henry Jekyll. So it incorporates a lot of, classic Gothic science fiction, also with quite a few original new characters, all incorporated into a new story that incorporates also, a lot of things about identity and, queerness and self-acceptance. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That period of history, is that something that a period that you've always been fascinated with?
I've always really enjoyed, I think what's really cool about the Victorian era, and to get sort of into like nerdy stuff for a second, I feel like, the 19th century incorporates so many elements of our modern world, but in kind of its infancy. So I think so many things that, we take for granted, modern medicine, modern science, all of these things were kind of just being discovered at the time. But what they hadn't discovered yet, was safety regulations. So everyone was doing kind of like what we're doing now, but just like with absolutely no guardrails attached. And so, everything was always on fire. Everything was always exploding. People were just like experimenting on themselves left, right, and center. I think one of my favorite anecdotes is, I believe, one of the ways that the causes of malaria, which is of course, mosquitoes, was kind of verified, was essentially, scientists kind of locked their labs in a room with just a ton of mosquitoes and just to see what would happen. And you could just kind of do that at the time. It's very good that we can't do it anymore. But I think it's very interesting to read about. I think it's a very fascinating, just like really wacky time to read about. So yeah, that's kind of where my interest came from.
If you were living during that time, what kind of wacky and weird experiments do you think you'd be up to?
Oh, that's a good question. Honestly, I worry, I think, for my own sense of morality. I think, I recently saw, have you seen Del Toro's recent Frankenstein adaptation?
I have not, no.
It's lovely. Well, how are you with body horror? Like, how are you squeamish?
I think I can handle it.
Okay. Then you might enjoy it. But it really leans into just like, again, like the kind of the gnarliness of that time period. And also, like, I think I worry that like I would be driven a little bit in that direction. It's like, oh, how far can you go? Like how far can you go with, the limits of life and death, and like what do these different body parts do? And if there truly were no limits, just like, I have a fascination with biology and all of that. So I think definitely something biological. And again, hopefully not too like necromancy related, but you don't know, put me in a weirdness situation. Who knows what'll come out?
Wow. Where do you think your fascination with this period of history came from? Was it reading books, or was there somebody in your family that influenced you?
I think it's definitely from my mom. I think I grew up, she really enjoyed, I think, English class growing up. And actually, I will say like a lot of, my readers kind of came to the comic by first being assigned, say, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, or Frankenstein, or one of these, classic 19th century books, and kind of Googling it, and my comic would eventually come up because it does incorporate these characters. So definitely that's kind of where people come to it from. And in my case, my mom, loved Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, all those kinds of characters, to the extent that there's like a wacky story in my family where, I believe in middle school, she randomly decided to start speaking with a British accent everywhere she went. And for reference, I'm half Japanese. My mom is full blood Japanese,
Mhm.
um, and she's third generation. So she was not from Japan,
Right.
Japanese, but you kind of retain a certain style of speaking down the generations, and so she had what like she would refer to as a Sansei or a third generation accent. But she lost that because she spoke with this kind of fake put on British accent for several years. And so it kind of like separated her a little bit from that kind of that natural accent and gave her a more kind of standard, it kind of evened out into a standard American accent in the end.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But she's definitely retained like that love of, of, of literature, of kind of the classics. And I think very much that was just something I was raised with.
Yeah. Now, you've referred to The Glass Scientist as a
Mhm.
comic. I introduced it as a graphic novel.
Mhm.
Tell me, is there a difference? Was I mistaken in introducing it as graphic novel?
I think it's perfectly fine to introduce it as a graphic novel. To be honest, I hadn't even clocked that I had called it one or the other. I think for my own purposes, um, I think any particular term is more of it's more of a language thing. It's just
Uh-huh.
more of it's almost more of a like a genre defining marketing term than it is, something that matters in terms so much of the content.
Mhm.
So I think graphic novel certainly carries a little bit more like literary weight to it, I suppose.
Uh-huh.
But I would consider the art form the same between the two, absolutely.
hmm Now, you are an author and illustrator. I also saw on your website that you're a storyboard artist. I've heard the term before. I have an idea, but I think there might be some people out there that don't know what a storyboard artist is. And so can you tell us a little bit about it and what you've done in that field?
Absolutely. So a storyboard artist is a little bit difficult to explain to a layperson. I'll try to make it that makes sense in a way that hopefully will make sense to your audience. Um, so in animation specifically, our pipeline is a little bit different than what you might see in a live action film. Our job as a storyboard artist actually combines the jobs of several departments, of a live action film. Essentially, what we are handed is a script, and that's, as like any screenplay, just words on paper, and it's our job to visualize and plan out every single thing that happens, in a very rough form. So we're
hmm
not turning in finished beautiful illustrations. We're turning in kind of rough images, but it is really breaking down every single moment of the film. And so what that means is we are handling everything from what shot choice, where is the camera placed in any given shot? It's choosing, when are we cutting to a new shot? It is the pacing, it is the tone. A big part of the job that I'm currently on is character acting. So you're kind of the actors as well. They are working with a voice performance oftentimes. Or those times you're not. Sometimes you're actually figuring that out by yourself as well.
hmm
And you're really kind of bringing the script to life and figuring out a huge amount of the decisions that will show up in the final TV show or film.
hmm
And honestly, like for me, the really coolest moment is, especially TV animation, our pipelines are so fast that there's not a lot of room for people to really kind of go back and kind of change the work that you've done. So oftentimes you will see, oh, that was my exact shot, or that was my exact character pose, that was my exact acting choice that is in the final animation. And that's really, really fun to watch.
Oh, cool. Very cool. I had a conversation, my niece and I had seen a sci-fi movie, and we just happened to be at an event, and one of the CGI artists that worked on that film was there and was explaining to us that a scene, 10, 15-second scene can take weeks or months to create through the CGI process. Taking a half-hour TV show, what in terms of animation, how long would something like that take to create?
It's a little teensy bit tough to measure in TV because the way that we handle things is because you are correct. Things take so much longer to create than they do to watch. But to create things at a speed where you can actually release, say, an entire season of TV in, a 12-week period, you stack your episodes. And so, one week the writers are working on episode one. Next week they're working on episode two, but the board artist starting on episode one. And then week three, board artists continue, but then the writers are, so like everyone is kind of working on different parts of each episode at once. I would say from start to finish, and that is from script writing all the way through post-production, about a year per episode.
Wow. A year per episode.
Yeah, but you are working on a bunch of them at the same time.
Sure. That's what I hope. I hope the families have those kind of conversations so the kids understand, just the work that goes into creating the things that they love watching on TV.
Mm-hmm. I hope so too. And I think like we're lucky that I think with things like YouTube or they're just internet, social media in general, I think that gives people who are interested in these mediums a lot of opportunities to learn about these things if they are so interested, or they can always just watch and enjoy whatever their preference is.
Yeah. So the Glass Scientist, back to the Glass Scientist. That's an interesting title. Where did the idea for that title come from?
Yeah, so I am terrified of titles. They make me so nervous. I absolutely, anytime I've, developed a show or worked on a show, the title is always kind of the last thing to fall into place. And it's always feel like an intense labor of love. For the Glass Scientist, it is this kind of slightly tortured metaphor. I think it comes from this idea that, especially Dr. Jekyll, the main character, his whole job is to present his mad scientist, his group of, ragtag, rogue scientists as respectable, upstanding citizens so that, the society at large will not attempt to chase him out of town with pitchforks and, torches as they might do to, a dangerous mad scientist.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to present them in this very respectable way. And so I had this image of him kind of placing them behind, kind of like in a glass cabinet. Which presents him as very perfect, but also very delicate. And that's so it's kind of a metaphor for the life that he's trying to craft for these scientists. That is all about kind of the outside appearance, but it's also by crafting that perfection, it's making them very, very vulnerable to danger, and especially making himself very vulnerable. That we'll see him in ways that we'll see him very much unravel and break through the course of the story.
Tommy, you mentioned that Dr. Jekyll is the main character. Is there a secondary character that you've really fallen in love with?
Oh gosh, yeah, absolutely. I think it'd be a toss-up between a few of them. Well, I do have to, of course, mention that once you have Dr. Jekyll, you have Mr. Hyde, of course, so he's naturally the character that Jekyll is playing off of the most. And they really, their relationship starts off kind of with this grudging, kind of a compromise where both sides of Jekyll's personality kind of can live comfortably with one another. But once friction really comes into the story, that compromise kind of falls apart, and then they start kind of attacking each other, and it's all about, should one really come up on top, or is there a way that these two sides of a person can live together? There is also, as I mentioned before, people have come to the story through the story of Frankenstein. Dr. Frankenstein is a character in the story as well. She is the source of that conflict that kind of throws Jekyll's life out of balance. Whereas Jekyll believes that, his purpose in life is to create a respectable version of mad science, a version of mad science that can live comfortably in a safe middle-class Victorian English society. Frankenstein believes that is absolutely not possible. In fact, that doing so would basically destroy the soul of mad science. She believes that it is necessary to the nature of science to disrupt society, to disrupt the status quo. And that therefore, if you become, comfortable, if you become accepted, you can't do that anymore. You can't really criticize society from this very comfortable position within it. And so she comes basically to destroy what Dr. Jekyll has built. And it is that conflict that kind of fuels a lot of the strife within this story.
Wow. That's really fascinating. How have the characters evolved in your stories?
That's a really good question. The quirky thing about this particular story, is that it took quite a long time for me to complete, because I do work. I don't work as a comics artist full time. I work in animation full time. So this is always my like nights and weekends
Uh-huh.
gig. As a result, I first outlined this story back in 2015. So like 10 years ago at this
Mhm.
point. And so just by nature, even though on the whole, it's stuck pretty close to that original outline, just inevitably, as I am growing and becoming, having more life experience, my perspective on some of the events in the story and the characters and their inner lives just naturally is going to
Yep.
change.
Mhm.
I think in particular, gosh, I mean, honestly, pretty much all of them have in one way or the other. Um, the ending, without giving too much away, um, definitely had a different turn in Mr. Hyde's character in particular.
Mhm.
Um, I think when I first wrote this story, um, I was coming at this from a little bit more of a perspective of, um, you know, Hyde being this force of chaos, being this force of somewhat kind of petulant, childish rebellion,
Uh-huh.
that he was much more in the wrong. And that it's his job to kind of grow up and, mature and to, acknowledge that like you got to put the brakes on, this destructiveness, because, the results are just not worth it. And we do very much see the results, and that are quite destructive and quite dangerous. I think having more life experience, I think going to therapy multiple times, let's be real, um, has given me much more the perspective of like, hey, actually, these destructive tendencies, these, perhaps at times antisocial tendencies, I think everybody has them. And I am less interested in like, just telling them just like, stop it, than I am interested in exploring like, well, what drives those
Mhm.
tendencies? Like what I want to understand them, and I want to know like what is the deeper need that those tendencies are trying to address.
Mm.
Um, and so it became less about kind of wagging the finger at him and telling him, you got to grow up, and more about hey, buddy, like, what's going on? Like, why do you feel the need to do this? Can we maybe get those needs met in a different way? And kind of allowing allowing Mr. Hyde himself to have more agency in his own ending.
Mhm.
And so I think that's a change that I definitely had to kind of like steer the ship uh carefully,
Uh-huh.
so that I wasn't disrupting, say, like the overall structure of that I had built so far. Um, but I think spoke to something that felt more true to me in the
Mhm.
moment.
Yeah. Now, if I had the perspective on graphic novels and comics that I have now, and I went into my son's room, and instead of saying, "Dude, read a book without a picture," I sat down and co-read The Glass Scientist with him. What kind of conversations do you think we might be able to have?
Hmm. That's a good question. Um, let's see. Well, I, I would love, I would love if this book sparked some conversations about, the about what kind of things have you felt shame about in your life? What kind of things have you felt the need to bury? What are sometimes when um you found yourself wanting to do things that you kind of know objectively are bad, but you just have this really strong impulse to do them otherwise, and why do you think that is?
Uh-huh.
Um, because like I definitely, I think when I was a teenager, um, I think I definitely struggled with, things like, like friend drama, or like, or being like wanting someone else to fail,
Hmm.
or, just kind of negative emotions that were kind of complex, that, seemed like things that, the mean girls in stories would do, or just like, uh, you know, the gossips or like the villains in stories, and feeling like I wasn't seeing the heroes in my stories
Hmm.
reflect those emotions back to me, and feeling very alienated because of that. I think I think a lot of kids, like a lot of like queer teens in particular, relate a lot to Disney villains, because they were kind of allowed to express a much broader range of emotion and complexity than, say, the heroes were.
Hmm.
And I remember from a very, very young age, I had a hard time relating to, I guess, like morally pure heroes,
Hmm.
or like even ones who like maybe they dealt like a little bit with some like bad emotion, but then like it felt like they went to therapy halfway through the story, and then like they dealt with it. Um, and I always wanted those more like messy, complex characters.
Uh-huh.
And I think what's really cool about literature is that I think it gives you a lot of space to just see other people experiencing those messy, complex emotions
Uh-huh.
without the need to immediately course correct and to like, oh no, well, this is the correct way to think. This is the right way to think. Like, this is you know, the proper way to think. And it gives people, I think, the time to really sit through their own emotions and process them, in ways that are kind of unique to them. And even if they're not, immediately something you necessarily want to, share on social media, or like, show to a wider audience, there's something that you kind of work out, with your friends, your family, your loved ones, um, and, come to your own conclusions and I think work through them in a healthier way.
Hmm.
And I think that's a great opportunity, for people to come closer and to share in that more honest way. So if my books can become, a conduit for that, that would absolutely rule.
That would be great. Hey, let's tell everybody where they can go to find out more
Mhm.
about the Glass Scientist and find out more about you.
Um, yes, so you can find Glass Scientist wherever books are sold. Should be in the bookstores now. Of course, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the places. You can also get personalized signed copies right now at Chevalier's Books. That is at my local bookstore in Los Angeles, but they also have an online store at Chevalier's Books, if you're US based. Um, and if you want to find more about me, you can find me on Instagram or Tumblr at Arethusa. That is spelled Arythusa, or at my portfolio website, which is cgoatrun.com.
We've had a really great time speaking to the author and illustrator of The Glass Scientist. Our guest has been S.H. Cotugno. Hey, Sage, thanks so much for being on Reading with Your Kids.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
This episode of Reading with Your Kids is sponsored by Ramble Office. Before I tell you about Ramble Office, let me tell you about what travel used to look like for me. When I take the Reading with Your Kids studio on the road, it was like a lot. I had one box for the mixer, another case for microphones, a satchel for my laptop, cables everywhere. And I always felt like I was forgetting something. That's why Ramble Office really clicked with me. Rambo takes everything I used to juggle, tech gear, personal stuff, and puts it into one smart, great-looking unit that's designed to be a mobile office, not just luggage. Everything has a place. Everything stays protected. And when you get to where you're going, you're ready to work. Instead of digging through bags or repacking your life every time you move, Rambo keeps your setup organized and ready to deploy. Travel days stop being chaos and start being productive. It's sleek, modern, built for people whose work doesn't stop just because they're on the move. And if your job follows you, whether that's podcasting, teaching, consulting, or creating, Ramble is worth a look. Go to rambleofficeanywhere.com, all one word, rambleofficeanywhere.com. Use the promo code READ, R-E-A-D, and receive 5% off any product. It's exclusive for Reading with Your Kids listeners. Check it out today, rambleofficeanywhere.com, promo code READ. Hey, my friends, I have a super idea you are going to love. How about this weekend, turn your backyard cookout into a storybook celebration? Fire up the grill, crack open a few of your favorite picture books, and serve up Big Fork Brand's legendary bacon sausage. Made with nitrate-free bacon and premium pork, it's juicy, smoky, and unforgettable. Top it off with Big Fork's spicy Chicago fire sauce, and you've got a meal as bold as the characters in your favorite bedtime tale. Get 20% off your order using the promo code READ at bigforkbrands.com. That's bigforkbrands.com. Promo code READ to get 20% off, because nothing brings families together like great food, great books, and a whole lot of flavor. Big Fork Brands. Read, grill, repeat. Join us right now from Bozeman in the great state of Montana. Our guest is here today to celebrate his graphic novel. It's called The Godfather. Please welcome to the show, Jake Wheeler. Hey, Jake, how are you?
Hey, doing great. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. Before we go any further, we should acknowledge that you are the co-author. You wrote this book with your partner, Jeff Cicadas. Am I saying his name right?
Yeah, cicadas. A lot of people say cicadas.
Cicadas. They come out every 17 years, right?
Yeah, I think proximity.
Yeah.
Hand grenades, horseshoes, and last names like cicadas.
So tell us about The Godfather.
So The Godfather is a middle grade graphic novel. It's about a crime family of seagulls. We got the idea actually on the beach on the East Coast, and we were watching some seagulls, and we saw how comically ruthless they were, right? And how they strategize. And if you're on the coast, you know seagulls well. And the idea had kind of popped in our head about the name of the famous mobster from way back in the day, Bugsy Siegel. Uh-huh. And we said, oh, how about Birdsy Siegel? And he's the crime lord of this whole family of seagulls. And it was just a funny idea. And, we're kind of having just some fun with it. And Jeff and I had worked together for like 20 years in comedy, and we hadn't had a project together in a while, so we're throwing this around, and we said, well, maybe there's something here, right? We're voicing over the birds, and we're kind of making up this gang. And then we said, well, instead of the Godfather, we should call him the Godfather. And that's how it was born, and we decided to just have some fun with it and see where it led, and it led to a book.
Yeah. Well, if anybody out there that is listening who didn't grow up on the coast, especially the East Coast, I was wondering if you were in New Jersey at the time, but, hasn't had experience with seagulls. They're very pretty, and they fly, and they look so elegant, but they are fairly ruthless and almost vicious at times, especially with each other.
Yes, they can be, yeah. And I feel like they get more aggressive by the year sometimes.
Yeah. Wow. I love learning how stories are born. And I think and I love it because we do have a lot of aspiring authors out there, and a lot of parents who are raising kids who are aspiring creators. And it's just amazing where story ideas come from. You just have to be open to it.
Yeah, it is. I think it was Nabokov maybe who said the secret wings by which these things grow. And I think he was talking about the novel. It's the novel form, but yeah, you kind of don't know if it's a story, right? It's just an inkling, or it's an idea, and then it sort of takes root, and then it expands, and then I think there's a time where you say either this canon should be unpacked, and I want to, and then you start, okay, are there characters? Do the characters have wants and needs? What are their goals? Is it, what's their arc? You get into all that stuff, but yeah, you kind of just start with that nugget of saying, like, this is a journey worth unpacking. And for me, in this particular case, it was, this is funny. I want to see where this goes, because, man, it's nice to do something that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that play on names, from Bugsy Siegel to Birdsy Seagull. That's very clever.
Yeah, it's one of those serendipitous things where it starts happening more and more, and that's when you kind of feel like you have something. One of the hooks we're using pitching the book is it's The Sopranos for 7-year-olds. So, you know, like a little mobster light, or one we just came up with the other day was it's Boardwalk Empire with birds. So, it's just, I think that's when you know you have something sort of fertile, when it just kind of like, you know, they as they say, falls off the bone like that.
Yeah.
And it's when you're like, okay, this is a fun sandbox. You know, we could unpack this and play here for a while. And yeah.
You know, the whole, there are so many great stories about organized crime. And it's interesting how there have been so many stories, fun stories, interesting stories about something so horrible as organized crime. But it's kind of, you know, a genre that is appeals to so many people in so many different ages and generations. And I'm imagining that a 7-year-old reading The Godfather with his mom or dad and just having a lot of fun with it, that could be the first in a lifetime of enjoying this type of content, whether it's in a graphic novel or a book or a movie.
Absolutely. You know, and that's one of the reasons, you know, I have nephews and nieces. Jeff has 3 kids, and, you know, we're lifelong readers ourselves. We're lifelong writers, and you see that there's beginning to be, you know, less reading and less reading at grade level, and a gender gap with reading. And in some ways, you could maybe argue that reading's always been hard, but now it's harder, right? Because there's screens everywhere, and there's demands on time, and, you know, there's a lot of shoulds we find in the reading process, right? You should read this book. You should be learning that. And the adventure of reading, right? The Huckleberry Finn, the stuff with animals that are on adventures, the stuff that just captivates the imagination. You know, sometimes that's not around so much anymore. So we wanted to really bring that back, write something that we would like to read, the 8-year-old, the 10-year-old within us would want to read. And like you said, a kind of a book that a dad could read with a son, right? Sort of that Pixar formula where the parents are kind of happy to see a Pixar movie too. You know, the jokes are there at all levels. So in this particular one, The Godfather, you know, the parents who have watched The Sopranos or seen The Godfather or seen these other things, they're going to get some of these jokes and some of these, you know, mafia, you know, I don't want to say stereotypes, but cliches and jokes that are touchstones to kind of adult culture. And then the kids are going to get something too, you know, the funny nicknames and the kind of the silly hijinks. And it can be the not just a way to get the child to bond with reading itself, but to get parents and children to say that reading can be our activity. And the parents can say, what happened in book 3? I think that character, you know, One Wing is kind of funny, you know, I'd like to hear more. And then the parents and kids can discuss.
Yeah. And I love what you said about helping a kid bond with reading. You know, the Reading with Your Kids podcast is all about celebrating that bond that families can develop as they're reading with our kids, starting when they're on our laps, when they're babies, and then hopefully continuing on through middle school and high school and even into adulthood. But it's in creating that bond with our kids by reading together, we're also helping them create that bond with reading. And I don't care what new technology comes down the pike, reading is always going to be so very, very important. And there's going to be there already is a difference between kids who read and kids who don't read. And kids who read have an advantage. Adults who read have an advantage, I think.
Totally, yeah, which is what it does developmentally for your brain to you know, to have to just process this much, and different types of memory and processing are involved. And you realize how instrumental it is for the parent to make a good suggestion, to make a suggestion of a book. At least for me, it was, you know, I remember I would read, when I was young, I probably got introduced to reading by my parents, but then I'd get stuck in a level of reading certain things. And then I remember one time, there'd be a book waiting on my bed, and it was, the myths of ancient Greece. And I didn't know anything about these. And, you don't want to try something new, but, a few pages in, I'm kind of hooked. I'm hooked by the characters and their powers. And, and then I was on that bent for a while. And then, some years later, there was a new book waiting on my bed, and it was Hemingway. It was For Whom the Bell Tolls. And, I was happy reading myth and King Arthur and all this stuff. I didn't want to read something modern. And, but I did because it was waiting. I learned to kind of trust the suggestion. And so I think that's one thing parents can do, right? It's saying, okay, how can I open that next door? How can I open that next door? And it opens the door to all kinds of reading. I didn't just read, Hemingway exclusively after that, but I was open to different things, and I learned, you learn to read sort of themes at a new level, an age appropriate level. So there's something really important about that interplay. And like you said, is there something sort of timeless about reading? And I think story is powerful, right? Screens are powerful, games are powerful, but just from the standpoint of being a human, story is very powerful. And a good story can actually take a kid off of the screen. An adventurous story, a vivid story, a colorful story with great characters. Maybe it's this one, maybe it's a number of others. Can pull a kid off the screen and say, okay, yeah, that was, I liked that. That was fun.
Yeah. Hey, it's interesting. My beautiful wife and I were talking this morning, and I don't know why it occurred to me, but we were talking about the Roadrunner and Coyote cartoons back in the day. And,
classics. Yeah,
classic. And this cartoon that was all about a coyote, and the whole thing was he was going through all these lengths and all this innovation to kill the Roadrunner. And, and it was just silly, but I don't see that being able to be produced these days. That's one of the things that we talked about. It's like, God, can you imagine, could that cartoon be produced today and be out there? How, you mentioned being in comedy for 20 years. How have you seen comedy change, evolve, devolve over your time in it?
Yeah, it's changed. It's changed a lot. I think, from around, obviously the 80s, 90s were kind of, there was a golden age of sitcoms in there. Cheers and Cosby Show and Friends and Seinfeld. And there was a really kind of wild period of time, movie-wise, when, from kind of like maybe 2000 to maybe the Great Recession, when the American Pies were out, and then the Farrelly brothers were doing Something About Mary, and maybe this is mid-90s, right? Dumb and Dumber. And, I think, and then comedy was kind of, with South Park got big, and, Family Guy, and a lot of these things were pushing a little more. And I think maybe there was something about, there was the Great Recession, then there was, the Trump era. Was there something about the end of maybe comedy in a certain form of extremity, of extremeness? Mm-hmm. And that maybe you kind of have to reset it a little bit, around, and I think it's still finding its way, right? We're in some, I think maybe some interesting, but kind of turbulent, societal times. And I think the role of comedy is going to kind of find its way. For us in particular, when we were younger, we probably did some more outrageous, comedy. With regards to this, because it's for middle grade, but also because the time is different, you kind of have to think about, and this is something even the guys, the Farrellys and other kind of comedy duos and movies talk about, earning the ability to, pull a caper, pull a hijink, right? Giving someone endearing flaws, giving them a good purpose. And if you anchor your world in that, right, this character has good intents, or this character is flawed, and that's why they do some things that, that maybe they shouldn't. And they're not terrible things, but they're, things born out of a feeling, right, of loneliness or, some sort of lack. That is kind of maybe where some comedy plays, right? It's a little more, a little less. I think shock is kind of hasn't been in maybe a decade, and so I think it has to be a little warmer, mm-hmm. a little more. And I think you see in a lot of comedies like Ted Lasso, right? very endearing character. But you don't have maybe these straight up comedies. They're sort of woven into a very interpersonal arc, right? With a lot of growth. And the comedy in that sort of growth arc are maybe more intertwined than maybe back in the day where it was just a joke a minute sitcom kind of thing.
It's interesting. I do, and I've done educational magic shows for 35 years, and lots of dumb dad jokes in my show. But
Love dad jokes.
There's one self-deprecating joke that I did for years, and I would show an empty bag. I said, I want to show you this bag. It's empty, just like my head. And for decades, it got lots and lots of laughs. But now, it doesn't get any laughs. There might be one teacher in the back that will laugh. But what I get more often is a little kid will, your head's not empty. You have a brain. And I'm like, wait, what happened here? We're supposed to be having fun.
Yeah. Well, things like, the classic, Chevy Chase stuff where he's falling off a roof. He's, it's, I don't know, maybe there's a certain awakening of a sensitivity, right. And there's good and there's good and that comes with that, but change, some things that maybe we were like a Roadrunner Coyote, right, or like especially anything those cartoons from the 50s, the 60s. Elmer Fudd would be walking around with a shotgun. He'd blow Daffy Duck's bill around his head a number of times, and the Roadrunner and Coyote's always got Acme explosives. I just don't think that plays anymore,
right?
Because of, the world. But yeah, I think what's interesting to me is you can is that it opens up new exploration to say, okay, what's the role of comedy today? How does it bring us together in a time where, it's kind of driving us apart a little bit. There's people that say, well, people are complaining about this comedy. They don't have a funny bone anymore. And do we just fall into different camps? I mean, a lot of things are subjective and there's a million kind of, genres and stuff for people, but broadly speaking, right? I think for a long time, the sitcom especially, we brought these characters into our living room, right? We wanted to live with them, and it kind of played that role. We wanted to live with the Cosby family. We lived with the crew at Cheers. We lived with Jerry's apartment, and Kramer was our neighbor too. And what's the role now of I think Ted Lasso was maybe got 20 Emmy nominations, and I think for that reason was it seemed to touch something that humor and decency can go together, and it can maybe bring us together in this way. Mm-hmm. But I think it's an ongoing exploration. That's what makes just any art interesting.
Yeah. Funny. Yeah, I hadn't thought of Elmer Fudd. He was never one of my favorites, but
no, yeah.
Yes, I don't see that happening anymore. How is it? I'm really fascinated with partnerships, and you and Jeff have been making comedy for a while, TV, picture books, graphic novel. How does that work? I know in the old days on stage there were straight men and funny men, and do you guys have that kind of role, or do you kind of switch back and forth? I'm interested in learning a little bit about your partnership in that process.
I'm interested in learning about our partnerships. No, we went to college together actually, so we've known each other for a really long time. And it's something that the ability to have a partnership, I think like any kind of like marriage, is something that you sort of grow into. You get into it when you're young and you think you kind of know it and you have all the answers. But then, I think when you're young, especially young creatives, you don't know maybe how to balance things. You always want to be the one with the funny joke. You always want to be the one that got the credit. And then as you kind of mature into it, you realize that the partnership's more important than the credit, right? And you wouldn't sacrifice the partnership for the ego. And in terms of roles, yeah, there's certain things I think it can be, because you have the role of like work, right? And you have all these sub roles like, marketing or administration, or, back in the day when we used to do a lot of shooting and editing, I was the editor and the IT guy. And so everyone kind of has to pick up one of these other hats, but you don't want to, at least for us, the fear was always that the other guy was then doing the fun stuff, the good stuff. Well, you can write jokes and I'm going to defragment this hard drive, and then that can lead to some animosity. And so I think what you have to do is, we all kind of pick up these sub roles and you just learn to trust and learn that, they're going to pick up slack for you and you're going to pick up slack for them. But on the important stuff, we try to keep it, we do all that work together because that's the fun part of the process, right? It's not to get something. If you took that away and said, hey, there are times where it's like, hey, if you can write this chapter and send it to me, I'll punch up the jokes and I'll start on the next chapter. But we've generally had the connection part. We've talked about what's going to happen. We know the arc is funny. We've given each other some jokes to run with. So there's times where you can split it a little bit, but we try not to split the good stuff too much because like that is the sort of raison d'etre, right? The reason you write with a partner sometimes is to actually write with a partner. Yeah. Because it's in life. It's one of the, as you get older, you say, oh yeah, these are the enjoyable things. It's not the print and the publishing. You hope the print and the publishing earns you more time to do this.
Right. So more time to do this. Are we looking to do Godfather 2 and 3? Hopefully Godfather 3, if there is one, is better than Godfather 3. But, I mean, is this going to be a series?
Yeah, I think that's how we kind of came up in sort of writing and character development as we, maybe again, going back to those 80s sitcoms, that's just how I always saw the world, right? It's people you want to live with, characters you want to live with. And it was probably true in movies too. I think the sequel didn't really become a thing until, we were sort of young, but whether it was Star Wars or Indiana Jones, you wanted to see these people again and again. And so that's kind of how we crafted this, and we crafted a lot of our books is, we want it to be a series. We'd like it to go from print to, other formats as well. Try to, get it back to, half-hour comedy pitch probably, maybe, something along those lines. That's fun because, and as you start to write these characters, you just like them, you want to spend more time with them. And so you want them to live, you want them to do more silly things. And yeah, hopefully there's a whole bunch of these.
Yeah. Well, I know people are hoping that you're going to tell them where they can go to find out more about the Godfather and find out more about you.
Absolutely. We have thegodfather.com, which is our main website, which, kind of has an intro to the characters, and it has our pre-order links on Amazon. You can also go to Amazon and pre-order right now, The Godfather, Birdsey Seagull. The publishing date is June 6th, but it's available for pre-order now. And we have an Instagram at The Godfather. And we're going to, post some of the character intros and post some of our fans with the books and whatever else fun that we kind of, cook up with our crew.
That sounds great. Well, I know people are going to love it. We want to encourage everybody to check out The Godfather. You're mentioning pre-ordering. I know that we love to encourage our listeners to support their local indie bookshops. I'm sure they can go there and ask very politely to maybe put an order in and have one available when it comes in.
That would be wonderful. Yeah.
We've had a great time speaking to the author, the co-author of The Godfather. Our guest has been Jake Wheeler. Jake, thanks so much for being with us.
Jed, thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Wow, that was a super fun episode. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Reading with Your Kids. If this episode made you smile or gave you something to think about, please share a link to the show with someone you love. Maybe post about it on your socials. We'd be so grateful if you could leave us a 5-star review. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd also be really grateful if you could connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, at JedleyMagic on X, our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids, our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Let's thank the folks who made today's show so absolutely wonderful. First, let's give a big thank you to our guest, S.H. Cotugno. Please be sure to check out Sage's The Glass Scientist, Volume 3. Also want to thank Jake Wheeler. He is the author and illustrator of The Godfather. I want to thank my team, Chris Doherty, Joanne Lynn, Jackson Sotalero. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we want to thank the most important people in this equation. That's you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every single time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.